registering foreign finders was a very new topic. We had heard a lot about it. And there is a little bit of language inside the RIA, but I think there was a lot of internal discussion about what best practice and process would look like. So I would love to hear, I think everyone kind of went through their own individual strategy. There's obviously a lot of commonalities, but would love to hear kind of how you went through your own decision-making process and how to get comfortable with that in an area that is still a little bit unclear and not very consistent yet from USCIS.
Yeah, I would say there's still a lot of areas that aren't clear, but this goes back to, following what is proper process and experience, like you guys know, can kind of dictate some of that in EB-5. We know what USCIS has looked for in the past. So even when there's changes or new processes, it's kind of playing that game of figuring out what they would most likely be happy with. When it comes to the Ks, which you're bringing up, again, that was a new process. So getting some of our foreign finders comfortable with it was a task initially. I think most that have done it now are comfortable, right? Once they've done it and understand that it's part of the process. And, I'm sure like you guys, we just told finders, you can't get paid unless you're part of this process. There is a reason for it. It's part of the RIA, and it's to protect investors. And I think the beauty of the RIA, one, extending the program and bringing new life to some areas for us, was these protections for investors. I think investors were looking for that. I think IAUSA was a leader in pushing for that. So now that that's there, it's upholding that. And as IAUSA members, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but we want to make sure we're doing that with everybody we work with. So that's what we've done.
Absolutely. Did any of you, Dan, you mentioned, most people got comfortable. Did any of you lose any agents who just couldn't get comfortable with some of the reporting requirements or the procedures you set up internally to make sure that your Ks were in good order before paying placement agent fees?
I mean, it took in some cases it took some hand wringing and some pushing and took longer with some than others. One area that we, in terms of enforcement, there's a limit to how much we can enforce there, right? The way the USCIS is requiring these filings and how they have to be amended, it's not very easy for a regional center to necessarily track. And it also doesn't help that the USCIS has been inconsistent when it comes to providing receipts for the Ks being filed in terms of, in other words, what's the evidence that we can lean on that this has actually happened. Pine State has, we have accepted the fact that receipts are not necessarily going to come regularly or at all. And so simply an agent or a wealth management firm or a finder providing us evidence that they have filed it suffices. And then the key is that the name under which they have actually filed that K has to then in turn match the name with the entity with whom we have our marketing agreement and the name that they use on these fee disclosures. That's another area that I think was very uncomfortable for certain types of agents who were not used to letting their investors know how much they were in fact getting paid. I think all of us, I know that the four of us, but also many other regional centers talked a lot in the early days after the RIA about how to really do that. And is it going to, not end well? Are people going to strike against this? I find that it's actually the brouhaha has settled down. And most, we work with at any given time, probably 30, 40 agents around the world. They've all gotten comfortable with this. And obviously, in other words, have had to, prove to their respective investors that they're adding value and therefore admitting that, hey, we deserve to get paid for it. And it's actually, I think, worked out okay. So, we are very transparent. We make them admit exactly what they're getting paid. And again, that name has to match the agreement with, the entity with whom we have the agreement. And so it's all about kind of just checking all the boxes and making sure it's clean. Have we lost a few? Yeah, there's probably been a few that kind of said, yeah, we don't want to be that transparent. And then there's plenty of other people to work with. So we've stayed on the up and up on that.
I totally hear you. I think the transparency within regional centers, placement agents, and USCIS, I think trickling that down to what investors are now being told as a result of some of these changes is only creating a more rigorous and honestly more equal playing ground within EB-5. One of the most important developments in the RIA was concurrent filing, the introduction of concurrent filing, which has increased the number of EB-5 investors residing in the U.S. Extraordinarily over the past 3 years. But it has also kind of brought into the question of, how most regional centers, the largest share of their placement agents were overseas foreign finders. And